When I first moved into the apartment, everything seemed painfully ordinary. The kind of forgettable, cookie-cutter space built to house broke college students who could barely afford rent and ramen at the same time. Beige carpet, walls the color of old printer paper, and a kitchen with cabinets that smelled faintly of dust and bleach. Nothing about it screamed horror. If anything, it felt safe in its blandness. I'd been desperate for a roommate. Rent in this city isn't forgiving, and when I found the listing online, it felt like a lifeline. The ad was short, almost too short. Looking for a roommate. Rent split. Private bedroom. Message if interested. No photos, no flowery description. Just a blunt offer. I met him 2 days later. His name was Adam. He opened the door with a small, polite smile, the kind you give a stranger when you're not sure if you should trust them yet. He wasn't loud, not overly friendly, but he was polite enough to make the decision easy. His room was already set up, neatly organized, as though he'd been living there for years. Utilities split 50-50, he'd said flatly. I don't cook much. I keep to myself. If that works for you, we're good. I remember laughing nervously. That's actually perfect. I'm a terrible cook, so you don't have to worry about me stinking up the kitchen. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. At the time, I chalked it up to shyness. The first few weeks, Adam was exactly the kind of roommate you hope for, quiet, clean, unobtrusive. He didn't leave dirty dishes in the sink, didn't blast music, didn't bring random people over at 2 a.m. Honestly, it was like living alone, except cheaper. I bragged to friends about my luck. But little things made me pause. For starters, I never saw him eat. Plates and utensils were always clean, untouched. I'd come home with takeout, offering him some fries just to be polite, and he'd shake his head. Already ate, he'd say, even though there wasn't a single
crumb or wrapper around. His sleep schedule was still. I'm a night owl, and there were times I'd stay up until 3 in the morning, binge-watching trash TV or cramming for exams. Around that hour, I'd hear his door creak open, not to use the bathroom or grab water, just to stand in the hall for a moment, almost listening, before retreating back inside. Do you ever sleep? I asked once, half joking. Not much, he said. Don't need to. We both laughed, but even then I noticed how he never joined me in the reflection of the darkened TV screen, even when he was standing right behind the couch. I brushed it off as bad lighting, the angle, anything but the unsettling thought that something was wrong. Still, he wasn't unfriendly. Once, when I complained about a professor, Adam gave this dry little quip. Sounds like they need to be retired. It was so awkward, so unexpectedly dark, that we both ended up laughing. For a second, he felt almost normal, just another college kid burned out by life. But the cracks kept showing. The way he always avoided mirrors, turning his head slightly, as if reflections offended him. The way his eyes sometimes seemed too dark in the half-light, black pools instead of pupils. I told myself it was my imagination. I told myself stress makes you see things that aren't there. And maybe I could have kept believing that, if it weren't for the first time I knew something was truly wrong. Looking back, the first signs feel so obvious. Like blinking red lights. I chose to ignore them because admitting they were real meant stepping into a world I didn't want to believe existed. If only I had trusted my instincts then, things might have ended differently. It started with eating. Or, more accurately, the absence of it. Weeks passed, and I never once saw Adam make a sandwich, boil pasta, heat leftovers, nothing. At first, I figured he was one of those health nuts who meal prepped in secret or lived off protein shakes. But then I started hearing him in the kitchen at bizarre hours, usually around 4 in the morning. Cabinets opening, the faint metallic scrape of silverware, soft, wet sounds I couldn't place. By the time I dragged myself out of bed to investigate, the kitchen would be spotless. Not a crumb, not a dish, not even a smell. Just silence, as though nothing had happened at all. Except sometimes, there was a smell. A sharp, coppery tang that reminded me of pennies and raw meat. I'd wrinkle my nose and ask casually, "Were you cooking something last night?" He'd look up from whatever book he was reading and answer simply, "No." That was it. No explanation. No confusion. Just denial, delivered so calmly it made me second-guess my own senses. Then came the noises. Low, guttural murmurs through the walls. At first, I thought he was gaming late at night, maybe talking to friends on Discord. But the words didn't sound like English. They didn't sound like any language. Just syllables twisted into shapes my brain couldn't parse. Sometimes it was chanting, sometimes whispering. Once, I could have sworn I heard my own name. During the day, he was unremarkable, quiet, almost boring. He'd nod politely if we passed in the hall, sometimes offering a dry comment about the weather or classes. But the nighttime was different. That's when the apartment felt wrong. One weekend, my friend Melissa came over to study. She met Adam briefly in the kitchen, exchanged a few words, and the moment he left the room, she leaned close to me and whispered, "Something's off about him." I laughed it off. "He's just quiet. You know, introverted." She shook her head. "No, it's not that. It's the way he looks at you. Like he's trying to figure out how you work." Her words unsettled me, but I buried the feeling under layers of denial. Everyone has quirks, right? Everyone has odd habits. So what if he was a little strange? Strange doesn't mean dangerous. Except the apartment didn't feel safe anymore. Sometimes I'd come home and swear the furniture was slightly moved, like someone had studied my things and put them back just barely wrong. Sometimes his door would be ajar when I knew he'd closed it. And sometimes, when I glanced toward the hallway at night, I'd catch a glimpse of him standing perfectly still in the dark, watching. I tried to rationalize everything. Stress, exams, sleep deprivation. My imagination filled in blanks where none existed. That's what I told myself, again and again. But there was one more thing, the mirrors. Or rather, the way Adam avoided them. If we passed the bathroom mirror at the same time, he'd subtly turn his head, as though reflections physically bothered him. Once, I caught him standing outside my bedroom door in the dark. I flicked on the lamp, and for the briefest moment, I could have sworn his face looked wrong. The proportions didn't line up, like his features were shifting, melting into something else before snapping back. I didn't mention it. I didn't want to mention it. Saying it out loud made it real. If I had listened to the unease crawling at the back of my mind, if I had taken Melissa's warning seriously, maybe I could have stopped myself before things spiraled. But I didn't. And then came the night I couldn't explain away. It was around 3 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of whispering. At first, I thought it was just the tail end of a dream, the kind of muffled half-voices your brain cooks up when it hasn't decided if you're asleep or awake. But as my eyes adjusted to the dark, I realized it was real, low, guttural syllables slipping through the air like smoke. I held my breath and listened. The voice wasn't coming from the hallway or the kitchen. It was closer. Too close. Slowly, I turned my head toward the corner of my room. Adam was standing there. No flashlight, no phone, no reason to be in my bedroom at all. Just standing perfectly still, his face half obscured in shadow, his mouth moving in a language I couldn't recognize. The words weren't sharp like English or fluid like Spanish. They were broken, twisting sounds that made my skin crawl, like syllables weren't meant to fit together that way. Every instinct in me screamed to shout, to move, to do something. But I froze. The only thing I managed was a shaky whisper. "Adam." He stopped. The sound cut off like a radio switching channels. For a moment, the silence was worse than the whispering. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward me. His neck bent too far in the motion, almost a full 90 degrees, bones clicking like dry twigs under weight. His eyes caught the faint glow of the streetlight outside my window. For a split second, they weren't eyes at all, just black voids swallowing the light whole. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My body screamed to run, but my limbs were nailed to the mattress. Then he blinked, and suddenly, he was normal again. Or at least, he looked normal. His posture shifted, his head tilted back into place, and he smiled faintly as though nothing had happened. "What are you doing?" I croaked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He chuckled. Not cruel, not kind, just casual, like I'd woken him up by accident. "You were dreaming," he said. "Go back to sleep." I wasn't. "Yes, you were." His voice had a strange finality to it, a tone that didn't invite argument. "Nightmares happen. Don't let them get to you." And with that, he walked out. No explanation, no apology. Just a calm retreat down the hallway. His door shut with a soft click. I sat there for what felt like hours, heart pounding, unable to convince myself it had been a dream. Dreams don't leave the sound of bones snapping in your ears. Dreams don't leave the smell of copper in the air, faint but undeniable. I wanted to scream, to call Melissa, to pack my things and leave. But instead, I just sat in the dark, replaying the moment again and again, trying to make sense of it. By morning, Adam was back to his usual self, reading quietly at the kitchen table, sipping water from a glass. He glanced up when I walked in, gave me that polite half-smile, and said, "Morning." Nothing in his face betrayed what had happened. No flicker of recognition, no guilt. Just normal. And maybe that was the most terrifying part. Because if I told myself it was a nightmare, if I clung to the idea that I'd imagined it, then I could function. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. My body remembered the terror too vividly. My ears remembered the sound of those inhuman syllables. My eyes remembered the black voids where pupils should be. I didn't have evidence yet, not the kind I could show someone else. But proof was out there. I just needed to find it. That was the night everything changed. That was the night I stopped pretending. And that was the night I started investigating. After that night, there was no going back. I couldn't laugh it off as stress, couldn't brush it aside as a bad dream. I knew what I saw, what I heard. And if Adam wasn't going to admit to it, then I'd catch him in the act. That's when I bought the cameras. Nothing fancy, just a couple of cheap motion-activated ones I ordered online, the kind marketed for paranoid pet owners who want to see what their cats are up to while they're gone. I set one up in the hallway, angled toward his bedroom door, and another in the living room where he always passed through at night. I even left an old phone recording audio in my room, tucked under a pile of laundry. The first 2 nights, nothing. Just hours of static images. Me walking to the kitchen for water, Adam moving silently from his room to the bathroom, sometimes pacing like he couldn't sleep. All boring. All normal. Then came the 3rd night. The hallway camera triggered around 3:12 a.m. Adam's door opened, but the frame froze for a second, the footage stuttering like a scratched DVD. When it resumed, he was already halfway across the hall. But the shape of him wasn't right. His body seemed stretched, blurred at the edges, as if the camera couldn't decide where his outline ended. His legs bent wrong, bending at angles the human knee isn't built for. I watched that clip maybe 100 times, telling myself it was a glitch. Cheap cameras glitch all the time. But then I synced it with the audio from my room. At 3:12 a.m., the exact same moment the footage warped, there was a sound. Not footsteps, not doors, a voice. Low, guttural, whispering the same broken syllables I'd heard in the corner of my room. Except this time, it wasn't just whispers. It was layered, like more than one voice, overlapping, coming from one throat. I swear to you, I heard my own name in that mess of sounds. Would you believe me if I uploaded it? If I just dropped the raw footage here for you to watch? No, you'd dismiss it. Say it was doctored, edited, a creepypasta stunt. That's what I would have thought too, before I saw it with my own eyes. And that wasn't even the worst of it. The living room camera caught him, standing in front of the window. Just standing there, staring out at nothing. At first, I thought maybe he was just zoning out. But then he pressed his hands against the glass. His fingers seemed to spread, not just against the pane, but through it, like the glass rippled at his touch. For a brief moment, the reflection didn't match him at all. It lagged, delayed, like a puppet following a master, seconds too late. I nearly threw up watching it. And still, when morning came, there he was at the kitchen table. Same polite nod, same half-smile. Like he hadn't spent the night bending the laws of reality. I couldn't stop. Each night, I reviewed hours of footage, pausing, zooming, and rewinding. I filled a folder on my laptop with clips, distorted frames, warped silhouettes, audio that sounded like shrieking slowed down 100 times. Every new piece of evidence twisted my stomach tighter, but I couldn't look away. Proof was the only thing tethering me to sanity. Yet even then, I didn't show anyone. Not Melissa, not my parents, not even anonymous strangers online. Because the thought that someone might see it, might draw their attention, terrified me more than staying silent. And here's the part one can't stop thinking about. Some clips weren't saved. Entire blocks of footage were just gone, wiped clean from the memory card. No error messages, no corrupted files, just erased. As if he knew. As if he wanted me to know he knew. I don't know what's worse, the videos I managed to save, or the ones that vanished. By then, I wasn't sleeping. I'd sit in the glow of my laptop, headphones clamped tight, listening to distorted whispers that seemed to grow clearer the more I replayed them. Sometimes I thought I heard laughter buried in the static. Sometimes, I thought I heard breathing in sync with my own. And still, every morning, Adam was there. Normal. Calm. Humans. The cameras had given me proof, but not answers. I couldn't keep watching from a distance. I needed to confront him. I couldn't carry the weight of silence anymore. The folder on my laptop was overflowing with proof, enough to keep me awake every night, but not enough to feel safe. Watching wasn't enough. I had to know. So I confronted him. It started like any other morning. The sun was spilling weakly through the blinds, and the faint smell of burnt toast in the air. Adam sat at the table, hunched over a mug of black coffee, scrolling on his phone. To anyone else, it would have looked like the most ordinary domestic scene in the world. But I was shaking. I sat across from him, my chair scraping against the floor louder than it should have. He looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "Rough night." I stared at him. "I heard you again. Last night." His smile didn't falter, but his eyes flicked to me just a little too quickly. Heard what? The noises. The whispers. My throat felt tight, like I was pushing the words through glass. "I saw the footage, Adam. I know what you've been doing." He set his mug down with deliberate calm. "You've been spying on me? That's not the point." My voice cracked. "The point is, you're not normal. You're not." I didn't finish, because in that instant, something shifted. His expression hardened. Not angry, not shocked, just blank. His face looked like a mask that had slipped, leaving the hollowness beneath exposed. Then his eyes went black. Not like dark pupils, no. The whites, the irises, everything vanished into a void so deep it swallowed the light around it. I froze. For 3 endless seconds, I was staring into something that wasn't human, wasn't even pretending anymore. And then, just like that, it was gone. His eyes flicked back to normal, the faintest trace of a smirk curling his lips. "You're not sleeping enough," he said softly. "That's all this is." My chest was heaving. "Don't gaslight me." I saw it. His voice lowered, each syllable vibrating like 2 tones overlapping. "You think you want the truth, but you don't. Trust me." I felt the room closing in, the walls pressing tighter. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run, but my body wouldn't move. It was like his words rooted me to the chair. Finally, I managed to whisper, "What are you?" For the first time since I'd known him, he laughed. Not loud, but sharp, almost cruel. "What do you think I am?" The way he asked it, it wasn't defensive. It was playful, like he was baiting me. Like a cat with a mouse, waiting to see how long I'd squirm. "I don't know," I admitted. My voice was small, brittle. "But you're not human." That smirk deepened. He leaned across the table, closer than he'd ever been, and for a heartbeat, his skin rippled. Just slightly, like a reflection disturbed by water. "You should be careful," he whispered. "Sometimes, seeing too much can make you disappear." And then, just like that, he leaned back, picked up his mug, and sipped his coffee, as if none of it had happened. I sat there, numb, my pulse slamming against my ears. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the moment was gone. He had snapped the mask back into place, and I was left doubting myself all over again. But no matter how much he tried to bury it under small talk, under feigned normalcy, I couldn't unsee it. That was the moment I realized the truth. And to explain it, the real depth of what he was, I have to go back. Back before me. Before the cameras. Before this apartment. Back to where he came from. I couldn't keep pretending this was just about me and Adam anymore. Whatever he was, it didn't feel isolated. The way he spoke, the way his eyes shifted, the way he mocked me with that line about disappearing, it sounded rehearsed. Learned. Like he wasn't the first of his kind to say it. So I started digging. At first, it was basic. Google searches at 3 in the morning, roommate not human, black eyes urban legend, imitator creatures living among us. Most results were clickbait, tabloids, or people making memes. But the deeper I scrolled, the stranger it got. There were forums, old, clunky boards that hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. The kind you can only find if you know what to type. Threads with names like skin borrowers, echo people, and the hollow roommate theory. And buried in those threads were stories that sounded too familiar. My best friend in college suddenly stopped eating around me. Said the smell of cooked food made him gag. But at night, I'd hear him in the kitchen, chewing on something wet. Something that didn't sound like food. She always avoided mirrors. Always. Said she hated the way she looked. But one night, I saw her reflection move when she didn't. Just a split-second delay, like it had to catch up. He lived with me for 2 semesters. Then one morning I woke up, and his bed was gone. Sheets, clothes, everything, like he'd never existed. I asked the RA, and she looked confused. Said I never had a roommate in the first place. My stomach dropped reading those. Every post felt like someone was describing Adam with just a few details swapped. And it wasn't just anonymous posts. There were clippings. Through a rabbit hole of archived links and half-broken Wayback Machine pages, I found newspaper snippets, tiny local articles buried in the back pages. College student missing after claims of stalker roommate. Apartment abandoned, residents say something off about tenant. Authorities dismiss reports of doppelganger encounters as hoax. The wording was clinical, dismissive, like whoever wrote them didn't want the details getting traction. No names, no follow-ups. Just vague references to roommates or neighbors who weren't what they seemed. And then there were the Reddit threads. Oh God, the Reddit threads. r/paranormal, r/nosleep, even r/conspiracy. Posts that would get buried in downvotes, or locked by mods within hours. The kind of thing people screenshot and share in DMs because they're gone before you can refresh. I remember one line, burned into my brain. They call themselves the Imitators. They live among us, feeding, learning. If you notice one, don't confront it. Don't collect proof. They'll know. And once they know, you're marked. That word, imitators, it stuck with me. It was the first time all of this chaos had a name. I kept scrolling, collecting screenshots, pasting fragments into a messy Word doc. And the more I gathered, the clearer a pattern became. They're always roommates, neighbors, or close coworkers. They need proximity. They study you. They avoid mirrors, cameras, or anything that might reveal the flaws in their disguise. Their diets don't make sense. They eat at odd hours, or not at all. Some accounts suggest they eat things not meant for humans. They vanish without a trace. Sometimes you vanish, and no one remembers you. Had them at all. And the last rule? It came up in nearly every account, sometimes worded differently, but always there. Never talk about them online. They're always watching. I know, it sounds paranoid. But when you're sitting in the dark, surrounded by a dozen open tabs, and every one of them says the same thing, you start believing. That's when I realized, maybe I shouldn't even be telling you this. Maybe by recording all of this, by sharing it here, I've already gone too far. But if I disappear, at least you'll know why. So tell me, has anyone else heard of this? Have any of you had roommates who didn't eat, who didn't sleep, who whispered in languages no one should know? I need to know I'm not insane. Drop it in the comments. Or maybe don't. Maybe that's how they find you. Because here's the part one didn't want to believe. The part that made me shut my laptop and just sit in the silence of my room for what felt like hours. Some of those forum posts, the ones archived from years ago, the usernames, the writing styles, they repeated. Someone would post a story in 2008, vanish, then a new account in 2015 would write almost the same thing, word for word. Like the same person, or the same thing, was leaving breadcrumbs. And if that's true, if these imitators have been here long enough to toy with us, to plant stories, to play games, then maybe the proof I've been gathering isn't discovery at all. Maybe it's bait. I wish I could laugh it off, close the laptop, pretend it's all just internet paranoia. But then I heard it. From the other side of my door. Adam's voice. I repeated the words I had just read on my screen. Word for word. That's when the proof became undeniable. This is the part that will haunt me forever. The part one can't unseen, can't unhear, no matter how many times I tell myself to stop replaying it. I set the camera up in the corner of the living room. Just a tiny black lens peeking through a stack of books on the shelf. Nothing fancy. No high-end gear. Just enough to capture what I thought might be strange noises or a slip of movement in the dark. What I got was something else entirely. It started at 3:17 a.m. Adam walked in from the hallway, shirtless, his skin pale under the grainy night vision. At first it looked almost normal. He just stood there, listening, the way someone might listen for a burglar. But then he tilted his head too far, past human limits. A 90-degree bend, like his neck was a hinge rather than bone. His mouth opened, not wide like a yawn, but impossibly, unhinging, stretching further and further until the edges of his lips cracked upward toward his ears. And from that black cavern of a mouth came a sound I never want to hear again. Wet, guttural, like static crossed with the scream of an animal being crushed. He reached up, and, God, even describing it makes my stomach turn, he peeled at his own chest. Not tearing skin like flesh, but shedding it. layer by layer, like old wallpaper curling off a damp wall. Beneath wasn't blood, wasn't muscle. It was shifting, patterns that didn't hold, like smoke trying to form a body and failing. And then he fed. I couldn't see what was going on. That's the worst part. The camera showed nothing in front of him, just empty air. But his body convulsed as though he were biting into something solid. His jaw snapped, grinding, drooling, and strands of something thicker trailing from his mouth. Now and then, he'd pause, tilt his head back, and let out a low, rattling growl. The sound was like a prayer whispered backwards. I sat frozen, watching, every instinct screaming to stop the recording, smash the laptop, erase the evidence. But I couldn't. I needed proof. Proof I wasn't losing my mind. Proof I wasn't just another paranoid thread in some forgotten forum. Then came the moment that broke me. For a split second, Adam's head turned. Not toward the unseen thing he was feasting on, not toward the camera's red light, but directly at me, through the screen. His eyes were black voids again, sucking every pixel into darkness. And his voice, though his jaw was still gnashing at nothing, slid out of the speakers in a low hiss. Watching is choosing, and now you've chosen. The feed glitched. The screen went black for 3 whole seconds, and when it flicked back on, he was gone. The living room is empty. The silence is suffocating. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring at the frozen image of the empty room, until the sun came up. That footage is still on my hard drive. I can't show it here, not because I don't want to, but because I don't think I should. Some things are too dangerous to release into the wild. If you saw what I saw, if you heard what I heard, maybe it wouldn't just haunt you. Maybe it would mark you too. I've given you enough to imagine. More than enough. And from that moment on, survival became my only focus. I almost didn't make it out alive. The morning after I recorded that footage, I packed a bag. No plan, no destination. Just an animal instinct screaming at me to get out. My hands shook as I shoved clothes into my backpack, my eyes darting to the door every few seconds like I expected him to materialize in the frame. When I finally zipped up the bag and reached for the knob, I froze. The lock was turned. Not from my side. From his. I twisted, yanked, slammed my shoulder into it, but the bolt wouldn't budge. My heart pounded in my ears as a slow creak echoed from the hallway. Footsteps. Bare feet on hardwood. Getting closer. Going somewhere. His voice slid under the door like smoke. Calm. Almost amused. I stumbled back, clutching the bag like it could shield me. Stay away from me. A pause. Then, softly. You shouldn't have watched. The knob rattled. Once. Twice. Then stopped. That silence was worse than the sound. Every breath felt like it would give me away. I backed into the living room, eyes scanning for another way out. The window. It was only the 2nd floor. I could make the jump. I rushed over, shoved it open, cold air spilling in. But before I could climb out, his reflection flickered in the glass. Behind me. Too close. I spun around, nothing. Just the empty room. Then a whisper in my ear. Run. I bolted. Out of the living room, down the hall, into the bathroom. Slammed the door, locked it, pressed my back against it. My chest heaved as shadows shifted under the crack. Not feet. Not anything with weight. Just movement. Do you think the others didn't try this? He crooned. Do you think they made it farther than you? The mirror above the sink rippled. His face blinked into existence, grinning, wide-mouthed, black-eyed. My scream caught in my throat. I hurled my bag at it. The glass shattered, raining shards into the sink, but his face lingered in the broken pieces, dozens of reflections grinning back. That was it. Panic overrode reason. I kicked the bathroom window open, glass scraping my arms as I hauled myself through. I dropped onto the fire escape, metal groaning under my weight. And then, his hand shot out from between the rails, grasping my ankle. Too cold. Too strong. I kicked, clawed, screamed until my throat ripped. Somehow, my heel connected with something solid. He let go. I didn't stop to look. I scrambled down the fire escape, nearly tumbling the last flight, and hit the ground running. I didn't stop until my lungs felt like they were bleeding. I got away. At least, I think I did. But escape isn't freedom. Not with him. Not with what he is. And that's the part one haven't told you yet. The part that proves he's still out there. Waiting. I survived. At least, that's what I keep telling myself. I got out of that apartment, left the city, even changed my number, and wiped my socials. But survival doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like running in circles, waiting for a shadow to catch up. And the shadows? They're everywhere now. And the shadows? They're everywhere now. I catch them in the corner of my eye, on the train, in crowded coffee shops, even in the lobby of the motel where I'm staying. Someone too still, too silent, staring a little too long. Once, I swore I saw Adam himself, sitting in the back of the bus. Same jawline, same posture, same black hoodie. But when I blinked, he was gone. That's the problem with the imitators. Once you've seen them, you can't unsee them. Every face starts to feel wrong. Every voice has an echo. I don't know if that's paranoia or if it's proof they're everywhere, just better at hiding than we realize. And the footage, the proof I told you about, it's real. Still sitting on my hard drive like a curse I can't delete. Some nights, I think about uploading it, letting the world see what I saw. But then I hear his voice again. Watching is choosing. If I post it, how many people would I mark? How many of you would come for next? That's why I'm warning you this way instead. Because I'm not the only one. I know that now. There are too many stories, too many threads scrubbed from forums, too many people who moved away or dropped out and were never heard from again. They're not just legends. They're not just stories. They're here. They've always been here. And if you've ever had that moment where your roommate, your coworker, or even your best friend felt off, like they weren't really them, like their smile held a delay, or their reflection blinked a second too late, don't brush it off. I ignored the first red flags, and it nearly killed me. So now I'm passing it to you. Has anyone else out there seen what I've seen? Have you heard the whispers, the stretching of joints that shouldn't bend, the words that aren't words? If you have, share it. Leave it in the comments. Let others know they're not alone. Maybe if enough of us speak, if enough of us connect the pieces, we'll understand what they really are. Or maybe we'll just make ourselves easier to find. Either way, you deserve to know the truth. I don't know how long I can keep moving before he finds me again. Maybe he's already closer than I think. Maybe he's behind me right now, reading this over my shoulder. All I know is that Adam, or whatever he was, didn't need me as a roommate. He needed me as a witness. And witnesses don't last forever. So take this as my last confession, my final warning. If you're watching this, if you're reading these words, then you've already looked too long. And if you're reading this, you're already in danger.